For planes took off that morning. Nobody on the ground had any idea that only two of them would ever complete their scheduled route. By lunchtime, two of the tallest buildings on the planet would be gone. The nation's military headquarters would have a hole punched straight through it. And nearly 3,000 people who woke up that morning expecting a completely normal Tuesday would never make it home. This is the story of how one clear, sunny, forgettable morning became the single day that changed how an entire country saw the world, and how the world saw America forever. Let's rewind a bit further back than most people usually start this story, because the truth is this day did not come out of nowhere. For years, a terrorist network called Al-Qaeda, led by a man named Osama bin Laden, had been building towards something big. Bin Laden had already declared, publicly, that he considered the United States an enemy, citing American military presence in the Middle East and its support of certain governments in the region as justification. His network had already been linked to earlier attacks, including a truck bombing at the World Trade Center back in 1993 that people but failed to bring the towers down, and attacks on American embassies in Africa in 1998. None of those, though, came close to what was being planned now. Small groups of men have been quietly entering the United States over the previous couple of years, some of them enrolling in American flight schools, learning to fly commercial jets, but strangely, never asking to learn how to land one. Looking back, that detail alone should have been a massive red flag. At the time, almost nobody put it together. Now, to the morning itself. At 7:59, American Airlines Flight 11 took off from Boston's Logan Airport, headed to Los Angeles. 92 people on board, completely unaware that 5 of their fellow passengers were not going to Los Angeles at all. 15 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 took off from that same airport, also bound for Los Angeles, also carrying 5 men with a very different destination in mind. Over the next hour, 2 more flights left the ground. American Airlines Flight 77 out of Washington Dulles, and United Airlines Flight 93 out of Newark, running a few minutes behind schedule because of routine airport traffic, a delay that would end up maturing enormously later in the story. For planes, 19 hijackers split between them, armed with nothing more than box cutters and the element of total surprise. Commercial aviation in 2001 simply was not built to imagine a threat like this. Nobody on the ground had any idea what was coming. At 8:46, American Airlines Flight 11 slammed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, tearing through the building between the 93rd and 99th floors at a speed of over 400 miles an hour. The impact everyone on the plane and hundreds of people inside the tower, and it severed the building's main stairwells above the impact zone, trapping everyone above floor 91 with no way down. For those first few minutes, almost nobody watching from the ground knew what had actually happened. Was it an accident? A small plane that lost control in clear skies? News anchors on live television were genuinely speculating about pilot error, because nothing about this made sense yet. Thousands of people below and around the tower watched smoke pour out of the gaping hole in one of the most recognizable buildings on the planet, still not fully grasping what they were witnessing. Then, 17 minutes later, at 9:03, everything became horrifyingly clear. United Airlines Flight 175 banked in low over New York Harbor and slammed directly into the South Tower, live on camera, in front of a nation that was already watching because of the first crash. This was not an accident. This was not pilot error. Millions of people watched that second plane hit in real time, and in that exact instant, an entire country understood, all at once, that America was under attack. Inside both towers, tens of thousands of people were now making split-second decisions that would determine whether they lived or died. Some started walking down the stairs immediately, no hesitation, just instinct telling them to get out, some of them helping injured strangers down dozens of flights in complete darkness once the power failed. Others, especially in the South Tower, were actually told over the building's public address system that their tower was secure and they could return to their desks. Information that turned out to be tragically wrong and cost precious minutes that some of them never got back. Meanwhile, firefighters, police officers, and paramedics were doing the exact opposite of every survival instinct human being has. They were strapping on 80 pounds of gear and running straight up into two burning skyscrapers while everyone else was running down, passing exhausted survivors on the stairs and telling them to keep going almost there, just a little further. At 9:37, while the country's attention was locked entirely on New York, a third hijacked plane, American Airlines Flight 77, came in low over Virginia and slammed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., killing everyone on board and 125 more people working inside the building. The nation's own military headquarters, the single most heavily defended building in the country, had just been hit, and suddenly this was not just an attack on New York. This was a coordinated attack on the entire country, all at once, from multiple directions. And by this point, officials in Washington were scrambling to figure out how many more planes might still be in the air and where they might be headed next. And somewhere over Pennsylvania, a fourth story was unfolding that most people did not learn about until later. United Airlines Flight 93 had also been hijacked, roughly 40 minutes after takeoff. And here is where that earlier delay actually changed everything. Because Flight 93 left later than planned, its passengers had time to make phone calls home once the hijacking began, and through those calls, they learned something the hijackers never expected them to know. They found out about the towers. They found out about the Pentagon. They understood, correctly, that they were not looking at a normal hijacking where you sit quietly and eventually land somewhere far away. They understood that their plane was very likely being aimed at a target in Washington, D.C., quite possibly the White House or the Capitol building itself. So a group of passengers made a decision that still gives people chills to talk about today. They voted on it quietly, plane to ground, over the phone. They planned it using a drink cart as a battering ram. And then they stormed the cockpit, fighting the hijackers for control of the plane at 35,000 feet, over a state none of them had ever planned on seeing that day. At 10:03, Flight 93 crashed into an empty field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Everyone on board instantly, but it never reached its target. A group of ordinary passengers, armed with nothing but a food cart, a few phone calls, and sheer will, had just stopped what could have been an even worse attack at the cost of their own lives. Back in New York, the two towers were now living on borrowed time, and the numbers involved in just holding them up were becoming impossible. At 9:59, after burning for 56 minutes as the fire weakened the steel supports holding up the floors above the impact zone, the South Tower, the second one hit, but structurally weaker from the angle of the collision, gave way completely. It collapsed straight down in about 10 seconds, 110 stories of steel and concrete folding into itself, and sending a wall of dust and debris rolling through the streets of Lower Manhattan like something out of a disaster movie. Except this was real, and it was happening to real people running for their lives, ducking into stores and stairwells to escape a cloud that swallowed entire city blocks in seconds. 29 minutes later, at 10:28, the North Tower followed the same way. The building that had been struck first, burning even longer than its twin, finally gave out and collapsed straight down. By the time the dust settled over Lower Manhattan, both towers, a fixture of the New York skyline for nearly 30 years, simply did not exist anymore. Where they had stood just hours earlier, there was now a smoking pile of twisted steel that rescue workers would spend the next several months searching, inch by inch, hoping against hope for survivors. President George W. Bush, who had been reading to a classroom of second graders in Florida when the first plane hit, was informed of the second crash while still sitting with the children, and was famously photographed holding his composure in front of them for several more minutes before quietly excusing himself. By the time Air Force One left the ground later that morning, U.S. airspace had been completely shut down, every single commercial flight in the country ordered to land immediately at the nearest airport, something that had genuinely never happened before in the history of American aviation. When the final count came in over the following days, the numbers were almost too large to process. Nearly 3,000 people killed across all four locations. More people than died at Pearl Harbor, the previous worst attack on American soil. Firefighters and police officers made up hundreds of those deaths. People who ran toward the danger instead of away from it. many of them never coming back out of the buildings they had entered to save others. Entire fire companies in New York lost most of their members in a single morning. The effects of that single morning rippled out for years afterward, and honestly, they're still rippling today. Airport security changed almost overnight and has never gone back to what it was before, giving us the shoe removal, the liquid restrictions, and the body scanners that are now just an accepted part of flying anywhere in the world. The United States launched a war in Afghanistan within weeks, looking for the men responsible, a conflict that would stretch on for 20 years, becoming the longest war in American history. New government agencies were created specifically because of this one day, reshaping how the entire country approaches security and intelligence. And thousands of first responders who breathed in toxic dust while searching for survivors in the wreckage would go on to develop serious respiratory illnesses and cancers years later, with some estimates suggesting more people have since died from 9/11 related health complications than died on the day itself. It is genuinely hard to put into words how much changed because of one clear blue morning in September. Not just policies and airport scanners and government agencies, but something harder to measure. An entire generation of people who remember exactly where they were standing when they found out, and an entire country that felt, for the first time in living memory, that it was not as untouchable as it had always assumed itself to be. That is really the core of this story. Not the buildings, not the numbers, not even the politics and wars that followed. It is the fact that an ordinary Tuesday, the kind nobody thinks twice about, turned into the single morning that changed how an entire country saw itself and the world around it, forever, and left a permanent scar on the skyline, and on the people who lived through it, that has never fully closed. If this story means something to you, and honestly, for a lot of people watching this, it probably does, subscribe to the channel because there are more stories like this one that deserve to be remembered properly.